So this morning we will try to continue to reflect probably, or try to integrate, try to understand the issue of it's a bit difficult, this inclusion initiative for us, the science technology inclusion, because the science, technology, and innovation inclusion, or however you are articulating nowadays, it was and it is the core business of our group since 1984 or before. And over the years, the science, technology, and innovation have been more and more, and the approaches to it, they've been more and more connected with economy, to put it in one big way, with national security, with global security, with kind of independence, freedom, independence movements in Africa or wherever else. And it became kind of not subdued, but integrated, taken into the context of central banks' interest in a particular area, for instance, currently, and so on, national visions and so on. So it was difficult to actually even give it a title to this science, technology, and inclusion initiative, alongside the others very specifically and clear, the financial inclusion, the central banks and data, quality and standards inclusion, statistics inclusion, and so on. So we chose today to specifically look at data and science, technology, innovation advice. Why? Because probably there is where data, value of data, leveraging, or kind of bringing in new impetus to advice in all the government structures that we have might be of an interest. And we have, obviously we have Omar, who is the archetypal for us science advisor, who doesn't only talk about it, but for 22 years just practice it, and we all of us kind of interacted with him and evolved our networks by the way of what Malaysia had to do up to 2002 or so. And we have Chris Chetsanga, who again science advisor. We have Heneri in Zimbabwe. We have Heneri. Lately was Minister for Science, but initially when first time we met him in 1984, he was chairman of the first Scientific Research Council in Zimbabwe. And we have Professor Georghiou. Luke again was very much involved with us for since 1984-85 in a particular aspect of science, technology advice, and the Caribbean to start with. And we have, as usual, new network people who are joining us. Phil Godsiff is not yet not as new as Alun is. Phil participated actually, for instance, or was part of the chief scientist's latest the report advice on blockchain and governance, or beyond blockchain, and he made a very good input since about a year ago to the central bank governors and all sorts of other think tanking that we had on data and cryptocurrency and blockchain and fintech, etc. And of course we have Alun, and Alun is more or less, I would introduce Alun in two ways. First of all, we knew of Alun for quite a long time. He didn't quite knew of us directly. But we knew him because of Luke. We knew him because of Ian Downing. We knew him because of the horizon scanning. I mean, we've been horizon scanning and foresighting is or was very, very relevant in this country, in the Department of Industry at a point of time and higher up. And the horizon scanning and foresight yesterday have been mentioned by Sheila Ronis. So we also know Alun because of Sheila Ronis, who talked about foresight and complex strategic decisions. And we know Sheila because of, just to show how the network, the patterns of a network evolves. We know Sheila, we know Katrin Tullis, together with Alun, currently are forming a very impressive School of International Relations, which, among other things, are implying foresight for diplomats and for worldwide global issues of security and otherwise. So here we are, how we know Alun, but it's first time I see him, it's first time we see him, not look, and welcome to everybody. So I think I did this differently from yesterday to introduce everybody at the beginning so that we don't take time, each and everybody who is introduced, to say a bit about the background. And we have to be careful that the people who are virtually participating, watching and listening, they don't necessarily know even who I am. Why would I know who is Mrs. Smith? So that's why I have to introduce each time who we are. I suppose, Omar, you probably should give it a start based on the fact that last year, as you remember, we talked about why information grows and why smart partnership is part of that and the network's part of that, and science technology advice in government structures might be implicated into all this.
Okay, thank you, Marina. Emerging patterns
Johnson.
for science and technology advice. I should start by saying that there are 4 types of science advice system or organization which are recognized. First of all, there is councils or advisory council or advisory committees. And then there is academies and learned societies. And then there is a network of science academies. And the 4th one is, of course, chief scientific advisors. But I think we should add a 5th kind, which is the smart partnership dialogue or smart partnership think tanking. Because on many occasions when we do this, particularly think tanking, is on a specific issues where science and technology comes in. And we have done that with President Museveni, for example. We have done that with other heads of government and senior officials in this room and elsewhere. So as far as we are concerned, then there are 5 categories of science advice. Now, if you have a science advice system, it is important to have, if you have a capacity for science advice, you must have a capacity for to receive science advice. And the problem in many developing countries is that the system to receive advice is not there or is not efficient. So this goes back to the governance and management of science, technology, and innovation itself. In many countries, this is not. I know it may be good at one time, and then it may not be good at another time. And if you take the example of Malaysia, when we have a prime minister who is interested in how science and technology can impact development, then the receiving system is there. But when the leadership changes, it's not necessarily the same. So capacity to advise must be complemented by capacity to receive advice. And now when we talk about science advice, it's always evidence-based advice. And this is where data, statistics, and information comes in. And I will not elaborate there. I thought this is where really data comes in. If you are going to advise the government on what needs to be done, you must be backed up by the necessary information to convince or to support your argument. So Mahela, that's all I'm going to say. And then,
Okay, start with.
thank you.
Thank you. Look. Okay.
Well, my role is often to provide advice to policymakers on the economics of science rather than the content of science itself. But I think this also illustrates some of the difficulties we're talking about. A frequent call, and one which I had to answer for the European Commissioner a few months ago, was to summarize the evidence on the value of research, particularly the economic value of research, which if no, not in relation to Brexit. This is overall, yes. So no, yes. And what we get is an overwhelming weight of evidence, studies over a period of 40 to 50 years, which are showing, for example, rates of return in the range 20 to 50%. But when we move back into the political world, we then still see what most would regard as a consistent under-investment, given that evidence. So why is that evidence not feeding in? I've given this some thought. I think there are probably a couple of key arguments as to why there's a gap. I mean, I don't believe that most ministers, political people, disbelieve in the value of science. I think they probably accept that it's a good thing, and even accept that it's good for the economy. But what they recognise typically is that it's something of long-term value. It doesn't necessarily, or at least visibly, deliver those effects during a single electoral cycle. So when there's pressure to allocate resources, you might see benefits coming quicker from some more frontline investments. And then I think there's a second argument behind that, which is on the basis of, yes, these benefits are great for the leaders, and all those high rates of return are probably being driven in Silicon Valley or somewhere, but they're not being driven for us. So it becomes an inclusion question. Now, both of those arguments are actually fallacies, because they both depend on a particular view of how science achieves economic benefits. They tend to ignore the much more immediate and direct effects of the production of trained people, and especially the ability to absorb knowledge produced elsewhere, often called in economics absorptive capacity. This works by doing research. You're able to use it, you're able to apply it. It drives the diffusion of technologies. And by the same argument, it applies as much to the most lagging country or region as it does to the leaders. So we have to sort of cut through some of these arguments against evidence. I mean, I'll come back later and say some more fundamental things about evidence, but I wanted to start with that particular example.
Okay. Now, Chris, I can't pass you the microphone because you are virtually, but we see you. Your picture is on the screen, and we know you for so many years. Chris, so you're a very well-known scientist alongside Omar, and could you come in, please? Hello?
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you. You with me? Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I want to salute to all my fellow think-tanking webinars at the CPS who are in the hub there, and there are other colleagues elsewhere.
Virtual.
Thanks for inviting me to participate on this CPM 2016 dialogue. Let me just share you a few thoughts that we are experiencing in Southern Africa on science advising. We, of course, don't have a formal flora where we all need to talk about how to advise our government, but from time to time we do. Where we have come in is we have said that we have to suggest to governments, first of all, that the promoting of development that is going to take place or needs to take place in Africa or in Zimbabwe, where I am, is really all driven by science, technology, and innovation. And therefore, the whole purpose of the national policy must be on promoting the achievement of science, technology, and innovation. And of course, this requires a government policies that promote science, technology, and innovation. We also need a system for securing and expanding funding for science, technology, and innovation. It also needs a government policies that promote the development of small and medium-sized enterprises. And in addition to this also, you need to have a government agency whose mission is to encourage and fund science, technology, and innovation, the research work to be done in universities.
Okay, this is the problem.
Lost him.
Okay. Just, Chris is a biologist, isn't it, Omar? And biotechnologist there, was in Michigan University, very well-known professor, but he returned back home when Zimbabwe independence and when he took over was appointed rector of the University of Zimbabwe, was very well-known, while Heneri Dzinotyiweyi became chairman of the mathematician of the Scientific Research Council. Between them, they changed chairs all the time, and where we were caught in very early on was when there was an intention for setting up the realization that they don't have an industrial research development center, a scientific industrial research development center. Everybody had one, a Council for Scientific Industrial Research, for instance, in addition to science research, but they didn't have one. And they tried hard, the UN, UNDP, and so on, and they weren't going very far the way they wanted to set it up. And actually, the Smart Partnership Hub, NECF, is here, Muzita, and this is how the Smart Partnership Hub in Harare came about. That was the reason why. All of us with the experience of the Caribbean Center for the Caribbean Industrial Research Institute, and from Malaysia, from Zambia, from whoever was involved at that time, we coached, more or less, Chris and Heneri, who've been present with them, on establishing from scratch, literally, how does it look, even an architect talking to him, what there should be there, and so on. So is actually at the moment very important capacity for Zimbabwe and for Southern Africa as a whole. So, what was interesting was that Heneri, for reasons, are we going somewhere? Joseph?
His battery died, full battery, so he charged.
Is Heneri online? Heneri is online. Heneri? Hello? Heneri? Okay. So well, okay. So what was very interesting was in Zimbabwe that Professor Heneri Dzinotyiweyi has been actually, I will bring in somebody else. Maybe Phil will come in. Heneri, as different from Chetsanga, Professor Chetsanga, who maintained his scientific kind of background, and we were brought in to assist him to develop an Academy of Sciences, Zimbabwe Academy of Sciences, and many other things. Heneri developed for the first time, because of his mathematics, in quality indicators for evaluating research in Zimbabwe, and it was one of the first countries with indices rather than just counting scientists and labs and so on, and equipment. But he became quite engaged with the political context, in addition to the economic, and he became actually Minister of Science and Technology in Zimbabwe. And of course had a big impact science technology policy, and lately, in the last 2 years, when he, after the dialogue in Dar es Salaam on leveraging technology, there was the idea of bringing in supercomputer or high-performance computer, not because if Tanzania, Dar es Salaam has one, why don't we have one? But there was a very specific reason why a supercomputer has been brought in, and has been brought in a particular way, as different from others, and is available, and this is what Chris and Heneri probably will also talk about, vis-a-vis data. But I think while we're waiting for that to be sorted out, maybe Phil can come in, and you try to be a bit more probably focused on data rather than okay, there are quite a number of them. Okay, please. Please.
Okay, good morning everybody. To those that are here and those that are not here. I've been asked to say a few words about the government Chief Scientific Advisor and Go Science as part of my role on an expert panel. It's a very well established system within the UK. Government Office for Science continues regardless of departmental restructuring, so I can't really remember what department it's in at the moment. The Chief Scientific Advisor does really two things in terms of providing scientific advice. The first is reactive in the case of an emergency. So flooding and Zika virus, he'll be called in to give scientific advice. And also within Go Science longer term reports, both covering immediate issues such as I was working on blockchain and distributed ledgers, but also much longer foresight reports. I just wanted to say two things. The first is about something that his right-hand man, who I was with last week, said, is that in the end we can give all the advice we like. We can get it as right as we like, we can get it as professionally good as we like, but it comes down to a political decision. And this is talking to the fact that emotions now play a particularly strong part in how people make decisions. The other thing that I wanted to say is the further you get away from science, and I don't think the blockchain one was, the more it becomes a matter of debate, it becomes a matter of professionals saying what they think is going to happen. And that reminds me a little of one of the great nuclear physicists, Richard Feynman, said, is, why don't we just say this is our best guess? So it becomes our best guess. Some of it developed over years, 20, 30 years of being professional, either in retail banking or in science or in academia, but we shouldn't get carried away that there is one rational, pure data-driven answer.
Is that all?
That's all.
Can't be. Well, let me show you, because I shouldn't speak about, you know more about distributed ledger beyond blockchain.
I thought we'd get the guys back.
Huh?
Thought we'd get the guys back again.
No, when they come back, they will come in. I think we need to at least from one of us, to be a bit more explicit about how the government...
Here's the pack shot of the report we produced. That was a reactive thing. In 2008 there was a significant banking crash, both within the UK and globally. Some countries survived. And that really stimulated the UK government to try and rehabilitate banks. So there's the political side of it. So they set up lots of work on fintech, a lot of encouragement on fintech, and a relaxed regulatory regime in terms of how startups, small banks, challenger banks could be set up. Not a lot of science in that. That moved very quickly on, and there was a Blackett report, a Chief Scientific Advisor's report on fintech about two, 3 years ago. That moved swiftly on to cryptocurrencies, and then it went on to blockchain, the most well-known one, and into distributed ledgers. And what happened was, I think senior levels in government said, what really is happening here? What is going on? And the process was that gets passed down to the Chief Scientific Advisor, who forms what is called an expert panel. Now, this is something that's relatively new. It's not like flooding advice, it's not medical advice, it's social and policy type and economic advice. So the panel consisted of really 4 groups of people. Practitioners who are actually out there doing it, both small and large. So there were some people from Barclays, there were some people from the Singularity University, which is Google, and there were some representatives of trade bodies. The next group was civil servants, and that was of 2 sorts. Those who might actually be wanting to do something along those lines, and in particular the man from the Department of Work and Pensions was there in terms of how can we reduce fraud in terms of benefit payments. And surprisingly to me, but I'll explain why, there are some representatives from GCHQ, the Government Communications Centre, in terms of providing technical advice on was this a secure system. So not in terms of are the bad people using it, but is this a really good secure system? The next group were academics. Now, there's about 4 or 5 academics. There's not historically been that many people writing about blockchain because it's so new. 95% of the people writing about blockchain are writing about the computer science end and the engineering end. And there was only 1 representative of that group on the panel. The other 4 academics on the panel were all social scientists wanting to be able to provide really social and policy advice on what these things might mean. So there was less emphasis on how this worked, much more emphasis on how it could be used and what it might mean. I remember one really nice remark from the government chief scientific advisor during the second meeting. We only met twice, which was during a particularly technical bit. He's a medical doctor. This is a long way from medicine, which amused me because that was still his job, was to try and get a grip of it and explain it and report into government. So I think this was a slightly more socially inclined exercise. How did it work? 20 people in a room. Who wants to write a chapter? Put your hand up. 7 people write a chapter. That then goes out for review to the other 30 or 40 people on the panel. You have to present your chapter to the panel, which was one of the most unnerving things I've ever done, because these were all experts in this particular field, and it wasn't like lecturing to students or anything who were hanging on your every word to see if they could pass. It was people who were trying to tear you to shreds, but, and take your point, with the right spirit. It was, we need this report to be as good as we possibly can be, because we think this is an important thing. And then, in the way perhaps of all of these reports, it disappeared for 6 months. And as academics do, they get together over a beer, and we thought the thing had been stifled, because we thought it was just potentially too disruptive to actually put out in print as to what the government might be using it for. And what was happening, and this is another part of how Go Science and the scientific advisor works, is it was being socialised within government. So the report was being walked round and working its way up the value chain. So it ended up as quite a significant report with 2 ministers writing the foreword. It's been one of the most successful reports Go Science has written. It's been translated into about a dozen languages, including Japanese, and the biggest, I think, favourable thing is even the French are considering a version. So I will stop there.
But I would also say that the same report in April has been, sorry, I have it. The same report in April, the Chief Scientist report, UK Chief Scientist report, has been the main point of reference as evidence of why Australian Bureau of Standards would be making a case to International Standard Organization to put forward that they are going to produce, they are ready to lead the production of a standard for whatever that means or could mean for blockchain technology. So it was, the only way you could interpret is, isn't it Commonwealth good that one can, but it wasn't that. It was the fact that it was an extremely good report and was daring to make a report on blockchain technology or distributed ledger technology to a government structure. So and in fact, within our context, we used that to advise heads of government, central bank governors, and so on. So here it is, the story of one particular type of advice currently, which is related to digital landscape, one would say, emerging digital landscape, but also how would you relate that to data, to the value of data, leveraging data? Sorry, I need to exploit as much as I can.
I was trying to get away without saying that we weren't particularly data-driven. We were much more opinionated, opinion-driven. Where there was facts or data, they were correct as we could make them. It is such a new field that writing about it in terms of what it might do and what its effects might be is a little like guessing. Hence my point, this is our best guess. It remains our best guess. It went out and immediately one particular very good technician said, I didn't like the diagram on page 5. Well, I didn't like the diagram much on page 5 because I copied it off of what he'd said, and he had changed his mind in the interim period. So I don't think there's a solution to that one. But
just one other thing. Did Sir Mark Walpole, the chief scientist, had an opportunity, I'm just taking that as an example, had the opportunity to brief the minister, the prime minister, because this is what our hubs are trying to say. Is it the case that without having that report, you don't go to, or you can then go to the prime minister, to the chief scientist in foreign office, or wherever it is?
What happened was that
Robin Grimes did say he had it, but what did you do about it?
Sir Mark Walpole went to see the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer 3 times in the autumn of last year to discuss the report with them as it was being written and drafted. So it was a very lively, interactive process.
Okay, I think probably we should move on. Thank you. I think we're still waiting for, you have the word. We're still waiting for Harare to come in, but it's very connected, this science technology advice, the type that the chief scientist here produces, with the foresight type of exercises that the Office of Chief Scientist or Chief Scientific Advisor has. And we have Alun here, who was within the what is called horizon scanning rather than foresight, but he's quite aware about the pragmatism and the power of that process. Yeah, and you might want to reflect a little bit also on the issue of having an abundance of kind of implications of data in relation to the issues that a chief scientist advisor may look at, or is being relied on the advice. In various countries, like in US, the OSTP, the Office of Science Technology Policy, in addition to the Science Technology Advisor, there is an appointee there was an appointee about 2 years ago, a deputy, a data chief, a data science advisor with the science advisor, in addition to the science advisor. So are we likely to see emergence of data science advisors, and how would they connect? Anyway, what do you think? Please, Alan. Maybe you say a bit more about yourself, because I don't know you actually terribly intimately.
Very briefly, well, first of all, Mahela, I'm very pleased and honoured to be invited along to this session today. Thank you for asking me. So my name is Alun Rhydderch. I now, for the past 5 years, with Kat Tully, who Mahela referred to as well, run an organisation called School of International Futures, which is an organisation that promotes the use of foresight, horizon scanning and foresight in organizations across the world. In fact, we've worked with 35, 40 countries already. And we try and encourage people to use these techniques to help them to develop better policies, better plans, and occasionally visions as well for the future. So that's our role now. We're self-funded. We're funded through fees for the services that we provide. So we're on our own 2 feet, or 4 altogether. There's 2 of us. So prior to that, we both worked for the UK government. Kat in the Foreign Office and in the Prime Minister's Strategy Unit, and I worked in the Foresight, in the Horizon Scanning Centre, which was part, in fact, of the Foresight Unit, still is. A little bit more complicated than that now, in the Government Office for Science. I was working there from when the Horizon Scanning Centre was created in beginning of 2005 until 2012. And I was working there under 3 chief scientists, under 3 government chief scientists, and 3 different ones. I'm sure you know them all. And so what I thought would be a contribution to this discussion would be just to talk about how foresight and horizon scanning in particular, how that fits with this government chief scientist mandate, because it's not obvious in many ways. We've talked a lot about evidence and data, and notoriously there's not that much evidence about the future, frankly. It hasn't been created yet. So how does this idea of looking at the future, having sensible things to say about what might happen in 10, 20, maybe on some projects 50 years out, how on earth can that fit with the discussion about evidence and data? And if it doesn't, which I think we have to see quite early on it doesn't necessarily, then what is the value of it and how does it complement the value of other scientific advice and the value that is derived from data and evidence that's more tangible and measurable and everything. And I think this is a very difficult thing, and frankly I think it was extraordinarily brave of Sir David King in 2005 to launch this thing called the Horizon Scanning Centre as a part of the Government Office for Science. It easily have backfired. Frankly, there are a lot of people, not just in the scientific community, but in general, who are very skeptical about blue sky thinking, about kind of crystal ball gazing, and I would say those people are probably more than usually represented in the scientific community. So he was a part of this community. He nevertheless set up this unit, and almost exactly 10 years ago, in fact, this month, when we first became visible, in other words, where the risk was kind of crystallized, I guess, for Sir David King, was when we published something 10 years ago called the Sigma Scan, which some of you may have heard about, which was nothing less than a collection of papers looking at trends and possible developments up to 50 years in the future. And it was published on a website with the government logo on it, basically a set of papers speculating, because that's probably the correct word for it, about what might happen well into the future. Because we were asked to look quite so far ahead, we had some things in there which were quite, how to put it, surprising for many people. And one of the papers that got a lot of attention when we published, and it made the front page of the FT, and it was published and it went around the world in newspapers as well, was robot rights. The idea, and this is 10 years ago, remember, that at some point in the future we may have to consider the issue of legal rights attached to robots, which still I think is for many people a strange and confusing and probably even unlikely phenomenon. But I can tell you 10 years ago it was way, way stranger than that. A lot of the developments we have seen now hadn't happened. So this was just to say that this was a government chief scientific advisor really having seen, and actually the Minister for Science at the time had to go through these and approve these as well. So really quite a brave decision to allow us to publish these papers, all of them referenced with evidence, but the kind of evidence that we had as footnotes to these papers that we published, 256 of them, by the way, were evidence that came from interviews with people who had views on the future. So this back to this idea of opinions, and the Feynman, which I love, is sort of best guesses to some extent. People with informed best guesses, people who'd analysed trends that pointed roughly in direction, and frankly quite a few websites of people that just had crazy ideas, but that you never know. And of course, a little bit of science fiction that came right as backing you up on that. So I just want to highlight this challenge, and I think it's a really important one, and maybe we'll come back to it on the data question. This challenge of thinking ahead. It's not comfortable. You often get it wrong. In fact, I'd say you usually get it wrong. We're just about to review those 256 papers we published 10 years ago, actually, and try and see where we were completely wrong versus only mildly wrong. So you often get it wrong. You bring in judgment and opinion and speculation, all of these things. But yet I would really make a strong argument that it's not by just looking around and measuring where we are now and where we've been before that we move forward. So if we want to move forward, and I think in this context in particular, we're talking about many countries, many governments that want to push things forward, it's not just by looking at the data around us now, however rich and impressively analysed this data is becoming, that we have the keys to going forward. So we need to have informed evidenced as we can make them, but definitely informed and thought through by a number of different people coming from different areas, views and ideas about the future if we are going to move forward. Maybe I'll stop there for the moment because I've spoken for a lot. But
how much?
My arrival, Michaela. We have just been connected 5 minutes ago.
Excellent, good. So you've been able to listen a bit to the.
Please, what he has just said over the last 5 minutes, I've heard.
Good.
When you are ready, can make it.
Well, then probably you're the right one to follow, because I was just trying to ask Alun what is his background. If you can bear with me, Henry, just 1 minute. Alun, do you have mathematics or engineering or political sciences? Or?
I have mathematics at A level.
Right. Okay, because...
You are very educated.
Right.
And actually, my studies, though, were in languages and literature. And after that, I worked as translator and interpreter in France. And subsequently, I created a technology company in the Czech Republic, in Prague, a startup in the field of business process software. And we worked on some of the first electronic marketplaces software with big American companies at the time, which didn't last very long. So I worked there for 6 or 7 years, and then came back to the UK in 2002, and since then I have moved into this third sort of rather different career again. So my background, like a lot of Horizon scanners, actually is quite made up of different things, and I think that we at least claim that that's an advantage.
Okay, and just one more thing, Chris and Henry, you're online, and you'll have the virtual floor in the hub in 1 second. How much of the horizon scanning has to distinguish between or has to integrate the research and other aspects, the technology in defense from the civil? Or do you need to, is there an opportunity to the horizon scanning to actually leverage what is being done in defense or intelligence into civil or the other way around?
Completely, and the word I pick up on there is integrate, actually. The wonderful thing about this field is that it enables, it in fact provides a perfect vehicle for bringing first of all, different types of evidence and data into the mix. So, of course, we use the best available authoritative evidence from statistics offices, from published journals and things like that in what we do. We would be crazy not to use that as a starting point, but it also enables us to mix in with that, to take us a bit further, other types of evidence that are going to give clues about the future, but also when we are creating future scenarios, when we're creating ideas about how the future might be and might work, then to do that we need to include data from different fields. So we combine data from economics, from politics, from social data, and very much technological, not just data, but also, I mean, the last project that we did, that I was leading in the government, was called Technology and Innovation Futures, and that was actually about technology and the future of the UK economy in the 1920 to 1930. So we were saying, how does technology, how can new technologies being developed now, how can we ensure that in 10 years' time, because this was done in 2010, they will be playing an important role in the economy, which is not just about the technology, it's about the structure of the economy, it's about the strengths and weaknesses in different areas of business, it's about education and things like that. So it's putting, even there, the technology in a much wider context.
I wouldn't have said only defense, military intelligence, but also space. Because we have from India here somebody present, Ashok, who is from, was worked before in defense research in India. and very welcome. And obviously the space is research is very ahead in India. And if you are a chief science advisor in India, one would think that there is this ability of having advice or horizon scanning or whatever it is, to bridge the two, the civil and the more bigger players, bigger research effort in the country. Do you want to say anything, or would you say after Chris and Henry? Okay, fine. Henry, now, Henry or Chris, who is the priority? I mean, Henry?
Fine, I'm ready
Fine.
anytime.
Please.
As I say, I'm sorry that I missed the earlier contributions, but the little bit I've heard and from our previous reactions, I see that there is a lot that one can say. My first point is to say that, we have gone through an era where the advisory side of science and technology made significant contributions, and it did so largely through explicit government channels, in some countries establishing ministries of science and technology, in others directly through the head of state. I'm sure the Omars can tell you a lot more about the basis for their success in Malaysia and so forth. My feeling generally is we have more or less drifted to a point where we are stagnant. We just are not moving. The people can do whatever they want and so forth, and they chain a lot of information, but in many countries it doesn't amount to anything. And some advice we can give, especially to innovators, to scientists, we can give them, but the truth of the matter is that advice or no advice, they will always continue to figure out what will happen in the next 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. And that stagnant situation continues with those who really move forward doing so entirely on their independent initiatives, ability to pick what is very important. And this situation, we need to break away from it by providing a context that we will now be able to relate, a context that again puts back the framework of science and technology on a basis in which many players find space. And my feeling is that today's world, particularly at the levels of government, we need to evolve a context of science and technology aligned with planning, with planning, so that when we talk of planning of any major activities in this country, the issue of what is that aspect of science and technology that is needed is taken into account. And when the previous speaker mentions the issue of science and technology in the economy, we automatically pick that element to say, what are the elements? But we don't end there at the level of the planning itself. We follow through the implementation of the planning to say, look, in terms of your budgetary requirements, what are the main things to be done? What is the alignment of science and technology on those major issues to be done? And to what extent will the science and technology make a difference? How does it make us accelerate to move much faster into the future? You can also align it in terms of requirements for procurement. When people are your procurement regulations, and I pick the previous colleagues' comments on the legal rights and so forth, we need now to quantify, say, look, what are really the safety measures? What are the requirements in terms of what can we be procured from which area, and what is the benefit of making use of science and technology to make sure that what we get is much faster. When you do that, also the space automatically created both for the business community and for your scientists, because scientists can now become players by bringing in evaluations of, is it true that when you do this particular project along these lines, you do much better? And is it true that you need more additional research, scientific research, in order to benefit this particular activity. So when I look at the general alignment of science and technology with planning, I'm trying to say, no, let's now create a bigger basis, framework upon which many players can come in and upon which a context is also explicitly defined.
Is Namibia on?
I feel that as an initial contribution,
Are they watching?
this is the kind of thing I feel would be relevant. And your
Chris.
bringing the subject of data comes into play immediately. It's a question of data analysis to find out what is needed, data analysis to evaluate whether or not we are actually getting the best, data analysis in terms of creating the most effective system which can enable one to move forward. So data aligned with science and technology inclusion, I then see a context in which many players can come in.
Okay, Heneri, maybe you think in terms of distributed ledgers, not in finance, but in advice, because what you're saying, there is no framework. But
even when you talk of advice, by the way, let me underline that it's no longer advice as we have been handling this subject, because it's no longer advice
No.
to a minister or advice to a head of state. It's advice to a science and technology system.
yes, yes.
Because now
So it's
you
a
are
distributed-
engaged in various things, and some things, yes, the boss might want to know to be clarified, but really within your overall system of what you have incorporated from the planning stage to activities that are on the ground require now some kind of advice. So it's a different culture of science and technology advice.
Okay, so let's hear Chris. He was a science advisor and you were minister. Chris.
He didn't advise me though.
Well, he was by then something else, but he advised the president. Chris, is Chris coming on?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, thank you.
You should be together, both of you, but here we are.
The issue of science advice is very, very important, but often the advice given is not listened to or is not understood properly. If I can tell you, for example, in Zimbabwe, the area of agriculture, there is this biotechnological area of creating of genetically modified organisms. There is a lot of global research that has been done, and countries like India growing BT cotton and rural people doing that, and wealth creation or poverty alleviation being affected. Here in Zimbabwe, there is no approval of carrying out this area of biotechnology where you are working with genetically modified organisms.
Are you saying no,
I
Chris?
have research expertise on it, and I can do it and provide that material, but the system is not accepting it.
Okay, so there is a disapproval.
Yes.
Okay. What about the other types of technologies you are encouraging, nanotechnology, for instance?
Well, nanotechnology, there are some who are practicing it, and some universities are starting some programs on nanotechnology. It is a very, very much up-to-date or new area of development. And I know, for example, our pharmacy department has gone into it in the designing of medicinal material and so on. It's moving, but the funding is the critical issue. When there is no specific government policy to say this area must be pursued, and this, therefore, in the annual budget there should be provision for it and so forth, then the rate at which a particular area or project advances is very much limited, and I'm afraid that nanotechnology is in that category.
Okay, what about the supercomputer, high-performance computer that you have at the university? In what way is being planned to be used? Because it's not yet, I think, quite
Well, that's a very, very appropriate question to ask. You know, we got this very, very powerful computer that the University of Zimbabwe, it's housed there, but other universities have access to it and so on in the country. Those who are using it are finding it very beneficial, but I don't think that the actual total use is the full extent to where it should be used. I think we could be using it even more than what is happening now. Now, Dzinotyiweyi might, he works with computer science and mathematics. He might want to comment on that.
Okay.
You want me to comment on what Chris has just said?
Well, I think, Henry, you were the one as a minister who advised the government.
Yeah,
and we were in Dar es Salaam when we, finding that Dar es Salaam has a Param supercomputer from India for a very specific purpose. You said, why don't we get one? Please.
Yeah. Can I just pick here from what my colleague, Professor Chetsanga, has said, first referring to effectiveness of science advice. You see, science advice is good only in so effective as the one being advised is good, in the sense of the one being advised understanding exactly what they would like to achieve, and then appreciating the nature of the advice. The big problem I think we face is a disconnect between those who are being advised and those who are advised. You get a well-evaluated scientific point like Professor Chetsanga has just indicated, and it's denied no longer on a scientific basis. And that tells you that there is some disconnect somewhere which requires maybe as a country to look at it carefully to say, hey, in what context do we need this science? Now, if I can move to the issue of the supercomputer, generally what happened was that there was a meeting, a conference of science with Africa when I was Minister for Science and Technology, Science with Africa in China. And China had a standing amount to support projects on science and technology collaboration. For my delegation, that's when we picked the idea of a supercomputer to be funded as part of that collaborative support. So the supercomputer essentially belongs to the Ministry of Science and Technology, but we agreed that it be housed at an institution which is likely to make greater usage of the facility. Our primary goal, if I may say, was to engage usage of this in order to promote the aspect of commercialization of science and technology. We defined a whole range of areas and defined the requirements of a committee to run that facility. And this element is still missing. The aspect of a comprehensive committee looking at the nature of the areas of S&T that can add value to commercialization and to collaboration, by the way, for instance, with the South African supercomputer facility in Cape Town. All that was laid down as a background, but I know that in practice it's not yet happening. It's again an administrative disconnect which needs to be addressed and ensure that those who have the authority to ensure that things happen indeed.
Henry, do you think that, and Chris, that let's call it horizon scanning type of exercise could assist in connecting or trying to connect as a process? Yeah, and, you know, in what way? Having you had the ability to attract capacity of a supercomputer in universities. So is in Lesotho, isn't it, Silas? So again, they are all over the place. And the only reason why we mention them is because we had this problem. We had President Kikwete, His Excellency, here in the library saying, by the way, I want we to discuss about leveraging technology and anchoring technology because I am given gifts like Param supercomputer What is a supercomputer? What could it do with it, which we cannot do with other computers? And like this, there are quite a number of these supercomputers, which are all around Africa now, just if we take Africa, but they are in Caribbean, they are all over the place. And they are connected with probably data analytics. So, we have to bear in mind that when we talk about leveraging value of data, say for science, technology, inclusion, let's don't call it advice, probably there has to be some kind of assessment, a process through which that can become more. So I don't know if a horizon scanning or a foresight or something, Alun, could be useful. You come probably back later. But I think I should use this drum because I think it's a small drum. I have a bigger drum. I think we did. Okay, we did actually go through all the interventions present for those present and virtual, and from all the smart partners who are joining us, not only for those who are here or those who are online that made interventions, we would like to have some comments. So there are emails or texts or something that we are going to receive, but in the meantime, who would like to make an immediate Boniface? Do we have a supercomputer in Cameroon and a science advisor?
You know better than everybody.
Yeah, I do, but I'm not yet Cameroonian, but I will be.
Okay.
So,
you are not a Cameroonian physically,
yes,
but you are spiritually.
No, it is already for about 6 years at least.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much for this intervention, and I wish to extend my congratulations to those who have spoken, which is quite enriching, but nothing is complete. So I just want a few questions just to deepen my understanding of the facts. The first thing is, actually, I would have loved to have a distinction between science and technology. Secondly, yes, I say, yes, it would have been good you give us a clear distinction between science and technology so that we understand better, because if I'm tomorrow and data, well, if tomorrow I am made a science advisor, I should be able to know exactly what is a science and advisor, technology and advisor. I should be able to make a distinction between the two. So I wish to enrich my knowledge about that. Second question is that I would like to know, there seems to be some sort of forward and backward linkages between the science advisor and then the other institutions. In other words, I seem to see some sort of pumping up effects of information from other institutions and pumping down from the advisor to the president. So, there should be vertical and horizontal, yes. And my third question would have been if we can have a clear pattern of science and technology issue areas that come up regularly that you have faced. We are talking of research or R&D. I think that's why I guess I'm not a specialist. We are talking of some sort of turnkey, or built-in technology that we derive from some investments and so forth. We are talking of patented technology. So, this is some rough ideas of what we did in school. So I wish now my knowledge must have been outdated, and I would love to have some clarification on what are the key issue areas that the science and technology advisors have come across, especially in the modern period. Yes, in the data world. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, and yeah. Well, I did mention earlier that capacity to advise must be complemented with capacity to receive, or even a desire to receive, preparedness to receive. Without that, then there's no use even if there's an Omar. So that is the first thing. There must be somebody that is an organization or even a person that is prepared to receive.
So you can
But
conceive and you can conceive and send it down.
yes, but there is nobody to receive. Then there is not going to happen. But science advice in the context of a developing country is different from science advice in the context of a developed country. And this is so science advice in the context of a developing country must always be in support of the overall national development objective, or nowadays is socio-economic transformation. And in that case, you have to talk about STI for policy. How can science and technology support the policy that government wants to do to achieve socio-economic transformation? And then if you say just anything that the government wants to do, there must be a science component to that. So that will be perhaps make the government listen that I cannot ignore science, because even if I want to say I want to improve the situation at the ground level, it needs science, then you have to pay attention to science. So that leads to the idea of policy for science. Mm-hmm. And the policy for science is, of course, the capacity, education, research and development, and all that. So that is the first two things. And then, in terms of, if you talk generically to support socio-economic transformation, what kind of science do you require? It goes back to what I said yesterday. The four critical groups of technologies: science and technology for meeting basic needs, food, water, shelter, whatever is basic requirement, and then of course science and technology to support wealth, quality of life, healthcare, education, transport, energy. Nowadays people talk about smart communities. What kind of technology do you need to support that? And then, of course, science and technology for wealth creation. This is where the new input that's required for economic development. And then, of course, science and technology for governance, which we said yesterday. Now, in terms of wealth creation, wealth creation, how do you deal with that? Just at a generic level, first of all, you have to look what is the current economic activities in your country that is important, and how will science and technology continue to make that important? Because there are new technologies coming in which can be destructive, so you need to know and how to bring that in to keep the economic activity at that level. The next one is which economic activity in your country which is at risk. Can science and technology revive that? And then the next one is new economic opportunities, new economic activity with high potential, with high opportunities. There are things like that, and the high potential can be because you have a special skill, you are close to a big market, or whatever. There is a special reason for you to do that. And the last one is how do you deal with new technologies? Is that new technology going to support your existing economic activities, or is the new technology and has got to be absorbed because it is a great enabling technology? So we talk about fintech, we talk about digital, we talk about data. Those are something which is essential anyway. So that has got to be absorbed. And then, so if you look at it from that perspective, then science advice become a critical component of national development activities in a developing country situation. In a developed country, the science advice may be different. They are looking at things from a different perspective. So, but the capacity to receive is very, very important, and most countries, developing countries, do not have that.
Can I ask you, Omar, when you talk of a capacity to receive, what exactly do you mean?
What do you?
In the individual or in the overall governance framework?
You need a governance structure that includes governance and management of the STI agenda in the country. And then it is very useful if the number one is also receptive to advice, because you can do well. To give my own experience, there were established formal channel that I go to to provide the advice, but I can go straight to the number one, and he has an ear for anything which is related to science and technology. So that was advantageous. But if you have the top and who's not so receptive, you must have the mechanism that you can go to, which eventually get to be discussed at cabinet level. But as we said earlier, science advice must be evidence based. This is where you need data and all that. So that yeah. Just before I so I'm wondering what kind of data the American scientists would require to give to Mr. Trump for him to believe in in climate change. I don't know. Yes.
I really think that we have other questions, yeah, and other dimensions of it. Thank you, Omar.
To complement the absorptive, yes, what he's saying. You see, there is no use training technicians to be scientists and so on if there is no absorptive capacity, which the example of Cameroon I gave yesterday, we have this this policy of absorptive capacity. If you train technicians, they come and they cannot be operative, it has no meaning. So what we do now, we try to make sure that we have absorptive capacity, that equipment, the facilities that the scientists can use.
That is the function of policy for STI. But you cannot have policy for STI unless you convince the government that you need that STI is needed to implement whatever policy government wants. So it's just a matter of...
I think I'm speaking on behalf of many, those who are out there. Thank you, Omar, and thank you. But you see, all what we were trying to see is not to go into the conventional, ongoing, as Heneri is saying, issues related to the science and technology policy debate. What we're trying to say is it likely, are we worried that the impact of data or new data that is emerging will actually change completely anything to do with shaping up a science technology policy, anything to do with the function of science advice or ministers for science? Are they still necessary? Are they likely still to exist, that function? While we're still continuing to ask questions like, which are right questions, that is an emerging economy or a developed one, about the shaping up and the processes for science technology advice through horizons, carrying foresighting, and all sorts of things. Is it likely that the pervasiveness of data and the appearance of these creatures called data scientists, or even the data science as such, is likely to shape up slightly different functions, even before we set up the conventional functions and agreed with everybody how to go about it? So this was actually the reason why, because for about 30 years we are probably leading, CPTM is leading in this field. And the other day there was a feedback from a survey which was done within this government here in UK about the availability of data scientists, or even if they are not called data scientists, data capability scientists in government. And there were about 300 or so, a survey. And the survey came up with the following thing, that those individuals who have got some inclination to assist or to intervene from a data point of view. They've got a good foundation of data science, and they call themselves data scientists. They are mathematicians, they have mathematics as a background usually. So these are the kind of people we want to look for. They have good analytical skills, but there is a great weakness in data manipulation, classical statistics, visualization, structured data, temporal statistics, etc. There is lack of creativity and curiosity. This is what came out from those who are currently in the government departments which fit in to functions of data scientists. There are key gaps in their technical skills, particularly related to, in fact, I mentioned, to big and distributed data, the kind of things that he was bringing in Phil, unstructured data, and so on. So they probably exist, these individuals. They don't call themselves data scientists. They exist, we know that, in Swaziland. We spoke, Moses Zungu from, he's, what are you, nuclear physicist, or you're a physicist anyway. And we talked quite many times about, and that's why you are here. You are here because you're interested in data science and data analytics mainly. Now, you are in Swaziland, and you could, and you are in a function of head of a smart partnership hub in Prime Minister's office, were there to be a survey in Swaziland to see if there are capabilities available in relation to data science or data analytics, and probably we could find there are quite a number. And I'm sure that is everywhere. They will be in Zimbabwe and they will be everywhere else. So the question is how to harness or make aware, isn't it, Alun, the availability of these people, integrate these people, alongside the conventional science technology processes, which we know they won't survive very long.
Can I make
please.
A short
please.
comment?
Please.
You know, Michaela, many countries which are weak economically, if you give them $1 trillion, some that money will make a remarkable transformation, some that money will just disappear. So the issue is not really about the money, it's about having well-structured systems absorb that money and yield the transformation. And this is the same thing as data. Data is just a massive volume of material which, if you can structure your systems in such a manner that you know what it gives you, which indicators you can deduce from that data, that's how you can make a forward. And I feel that the challenge is not even down in these various countries. The challenge is in core organizations like CPTM with a few selected individuals to evolve that format of a system whereby you can take advantage of data substantially to enhance financial inclusion. Mm-hmm. That is where the real issue is. If you just talk of those who have capacity, they will always say, yeah, we are around, but without a system, whatever they can offer, and they may not even be well directed in terms of what actually should be done.
Okay.
That's what I see as a problem.
Okay. I'd like to bring our new smart partner from India. Please, you should be around here too. But
first of all, good morning everybody. Sorry for being late. First of all, thank you for inviting to CPTM. Of course, the acting High Commissioner could not join for some other reasons, so he asked me to attend this. And I mean, I'm.
Could you speak a bit louder, or do you want to come here? Just.
It's okay. I think I'll be a little louder.
Yes.
And first of all, seeing everybody and listening to this discussion, I mean, it's more of learning phase for me. Okay, and a lot of things which I'm learning here. It's great. One of the point just to add to what Mr. Heneri was adding, the data analytics is definitely catching up, but you must know what you want.
Yes.
Those people who study statistics will know with the same data I can give you the inference what you need. Okay, you tell me what you want, I'll give you the result. I mean, it's that. So you must know what you exactly want and what you know.
What's the problem?
What's the problem and what you want to attack.
It's not just
I mean, one of the from my understanding, of course, my understanding is, of course, all of you are much more experienced. I may be wrong in a lot of things what I'm commenting, but from my knowledge, I mean, so you must have the correct people, and what one of the speakers was talking about is the data scientists. Few of them, of course, they are people with analytics. They really don't know what you want and what to interpret. So we need both going together. The people with vision, people having worked, who know what they're looking for, they're complemented by the people who can do this activity, who are good at that analytic skills, and provide them. So it now becomes like what we were talking about, the horizon scanning, with the data for that particular result what I'm giving, substantiated by certain evidences. Earlier it used to be more of the experience. Now experience gets added on by objective evidence, not just so that's what my feeling is. And I'm an engineer.
Yeah.
Basically an engineer, and of course, having worked in the field of defense, but I'm mostly worked on the field of quality and and reliability. So that has been my area. I mean, personally.
Scientists in India.
Often,
which
yes,
could be described as such, because we are looking to see how do they look even, but never mind what they are.
From my experience, yes, we
There
have.
must be.
And with the way, India, a lot of software-oriented companies originating. We have lots of people looking into this, and this is definitely one of the major thrust areas there, which people are taking up. But again, my personal feeling was, fine, they can do the job, but you must know what you're looking for. So...
Okay. I just want to support what has been said over here and endorse what Alan's been saying about horizon scanning. I've got one or two slides that I prepared yesterday in anticipation, only about 4, which Joe's is putting up at the moment. My background, by the way, I was in academic first and then I went into industry, and now in my 20 years of retirement I'm looking after government projects and helping out where I can. I've got some good examples of where people have said what they wanted. Like I worked for the World Bank for a wee while, which gave loaned several millions to Argentina to put into nanotechnology, and that's now achieving results. But one of the better things that I got into was road mapping, which is a really cheap way of horizon scanning. There's a definition up there which says what horizon scanning is, but it's a bit of a tool for consultants to tell you what a SWOT analysis is: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And this is all it is, road mapping. It's where are we now, finding out what's been done already. It's moving on then to saying where we want to be. That's where hopefully it comes in from the top. And then, of course, this SWOT, SW for the first two, strengths and weaknesses, opportunities are the second one, and then the threats. What's stopping us actually getting to where we want to be? And of course, then come the actions. You have to decide where you're going to go. And that's what horizon scanning enables you to do. Having listened yesterday to the excellent webinar, it's important that those don't take hours to get into, and the passwords are enormous. It was very easy to get into, and I think that will help communications in the future. Well done. But David Bell yesterday mentioned additive manufacturing. That's where you're producing a print. You have a printer that does things in 3 dimensions. 3D printing. I looked up on the web. It took me probably less than a quarter of an hour to come up with what I'm about to show you now. Huge reports from Australia on additive manufacturing, another one, big one from South Africa, another one from JO, the Accountability Office in the States. That's a really good one that actually you introduced me to, yeah. And the Brits have come up with one from their Royal Academy of Engineering. And there's even one from the Brits on what's been patented already. And this is only in the last 5 years or so. And then there's a whole host of others. 12 reports in 15 minutes. There's a hell of a lot of data there. And you don't actually have to have much knowledge to know where to go and find it on the web nowadays, especially with Google. And what you come up with is a list of topics and a time scale that you've got to focus in on to achieve those objectives for whoever's telling you what to do. And I started thinking, well, what are the priorities at the moment? And for me, additive manufacturing, certainly for developing nations, you can produce widgets on the spot very, very quickly without having to wait for them to come in from elsewhere. But another one is sensors, and that's a really hot topic that I feel the Brits should be putting a lot more money into. And it's all about, for example, detecting the disease before it's got a hold on the body. And there's sensors capable of doing that now. And then I began thinking, well, how else can it help some of you in the room here? And of course, the main features are exactly what we're looking at in the UK and focusing on. And that's healthcare, energy, transport, agriculture and security. But I don't think I've missed too many out. And then all the other information that's around, specifically on R&D and who else has got priorities. And this report, again, I think was sent out to all the Smart Partnership members. And a whole list there of important technologies for the coming years is listed down there. So this, what I'm saying is there's a hell of a lot of data around. Yeah. Rather.
Books, just so because of what we do now.
All, before you do proper horizon scanning, find out what everybody else has done before. Almost certainly they've had a sniff at it.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. So, before we go, because I'm watching the 11:45, before we're going to further questions, because there are further comments to integrate the central banks and all the other understanding we had yesterday. The idea was that the emergence of availability of understanding the value of data and therefore put to work that value of data is obviously associated not with a centralized kind of, but is associated with networks. And particularly with, I don't know if Ashok Jain is online from New Delhi. He will come in if he's not yet. The issue, therefore, of the science of networks, if you can call it like this, is probably either part of the data science or data science part of network. They are kind of the same, in the same area. And it's not the science that interests us, but it interests us how this issue of the value of data, which you can see it in when you see exchanges on mobile banking in Swaziland, you know, a mother pays somebody on the phone something, data is being generated, and networks are shaping between those who are engaged in this transaction, including probably the central banks for whatever other reasons, and probably the Bureau of Standard and whoever else, but individuals, networks. Now, Ashok and I, we are particularly watching this issue of networks and adaptive complex systems and all the rest, particularly in relation to our group, to understand how our group, CPTM, evolved since 1984, why it evolved, what uses it, and how could it continue to evolve, and what impact, for instance, the data emergence and the digital landscape makes on the kind of delivery of inputs from the network and how is to be resourced and all the rest of it. And I have only 3 points to say, not only because it's very short time, but also because they require probably a very thorough think tanking on its own. One is that because it is obviously that networks emerge because of data which is put to use, or because it's exploited, or because it's been monetized. Yeah? We are having the situation that there are what is called scale-free networks that are emerging, which are very difficult, unintuitively kind of, maybe you can help me, type of networks. If for years we tried to visualize a network like this buckyball. Now this buckyball has small networks, yeah, like the financial inclusion governance networks in our group, like the quality and standards network, etc. The 6 initiatives that we have, those are networks like these ones who are forming a larger, bigger picture of a network, which at any point of time is not related to a scale. It's scalable, is very big or very small, is lighting, is active, or it sits there and absorbs data or information, is put to work. So the issue of scale-free networks are essentially to be understood in relation to data, because that requires a slightly different type of resource. In fact, it probably requires less financial resource and different type of budgeting, different type of advice. It requires stimulating these scale-free networks. And but there are limits, obviously, also, which data science and science of networks are telling us, that I'm told that the capacity of human being is one individual is you can entertain at the same time 6 particular issues to work on, matters that you're working on. You don't just scan and look on the net and so on. Those 6 issues connect you with so many in a network, yeah, and there couldn't be more that you entertain than about 25. So therefore, a kind of network which interacts, a network of networks that interact with each other and they feed each other, is about kind of, 150, 125, 175 maximum that you can as a human being. But of course, if you take it into supercomputers and others, you might be able to do more. But still, in relation to networks that you can stimulate and engage for the purposes of government implementation, private sector going on, there is, and that is valid not only in developed countries or developing countries. I think is irrelevant the fact that it's a developed or developing country context. So there is this idea of a completely new type of strategy that even CPTM should adopt in promoting stimulus to scale-free networks, specifically organized around, for instance, as it emerged naturally, central banks, quality and standards. But what it also emerged, driven by demand, was that the central banks, that they're about kind of 15 or so in that network, they required to interact with the Bureau of Standards, or we will inform them that they need to have some interaction with them and with statistics and with data. So, and it's not larger, if you look at the names and the number, it's not larger than about 160 or so. This is a natural an evidence of that particular input from the current understanding of scale-free networks. There is a lot of work in progress about data science and adaptive networks. scale-free networks, which one doesn't need to go into this. There is evidence in our own CPTM of how we evolved in real time in actually the countries where we are particularly active. So I don't know if Ashok is online. Ashok?
I am.
Ashok,
Yeah, Mehela, I'm online.
you were supposed to come in first. Can you follow me now? But because I had to.
Right, I will.
Please.
Well, good afternoon to everyone. This is Ashok Jain from New Delhi.
And by the way, say what is your background, because otherwise.
I am trained as a physicist, but over the years have been looking at connection of science technology with development, especially with Mehela and CPTM group. Lately, I have been looking little more deeply into the networks. And interestingly, when you talk of networks, there are two ends to it. One is the network in itself. The other is when the network results get connected to the user. Now, for example, banks. Now, banks will have their own network of financial flows and so on. And then these networks serve a network of users. Now, this interaction in the serving itself provides feedback to the network. Therefore, the networks are now not a static network, but learning networks. And I think there is a more focus on the learning network. How do the network dynamics itself keep changing through interaction with those who use the network? And this is very common now, and many of the government institutions, even in science and technology, for example, they want to see how agriculture research is being used by farmers, and from the feedback of the farmers, they change the method of research itself. So the learning network is an emerging concept, and I think it's particularly relevant because on one hand, people are talking of big data, but the big data itself, unless it interacts with the users of the data, doesn't become a learning data. So, in very brief, Mehela, and all the others who are kindly present there, I would simply say that networks are live networks, they are learning networks, and there are methods in which you can literally index the learning capabilities using ideas of entropy and complexity and so on and so forth. That's about what I wish to say.
But there is, connected to that, isn't it? Because were you to be first, then I would have said it, but I'll say it now. When we visualize these networks, if we focus on our CPTM type of networks, these 6 networks that have emerged, those small networks, they are in themselves learning. But what CPTM overall global
amongst themselves, they learn.
No, but they are what is referred to as small worlds. Yeah, is a small little world. But where learning really makes a big difference is when, through the CPTM kind of existence, there is a long link established between all these various initiatives. And there is where is the strategic intervention that CPTM makes or will be able to make much more from now on, if we are aware of how to interpret this. But so, thank you very much. I think we didn't want to bore you with the mathematics of scale-free networks and everything else. But Henry, you are a mathematician. You should have talked about this.
You know, generally, it's wiser to avoid talking in terms of different networks. It's better to talk in terms of sub-networks. So that you are trying to build up, for instance, from the angle of CPTM. You are trying to build up a broad network which benefits in various forms. And within it you have sub-networks, and you need all those sub-networks to have a relevant link within your broader network. When you do that, it's easier to comprehend the bigger picture than treating them as separate entities.
But you are, Heneri, implying that there is God somewhere who is setting up a bigger tent of networks, and then there are sub-networks, or there is an architect who. I think the way the networks emerge are quite kind of small little ones, and then they are put together. Yeah, probably, or they come together. But anyway, could we have just one or two comments, but quite short, on both sides? Yes.
I would like to
make a Chris, please, Chris.
I would like to make just a comment.
Please.
On data.
Yes.
Data importance. About 5 years ago, we were in Malaysia at a CPTM meeting. Are you listening?
Yes, we hear you very well. We don't see you, but you see us.
We were at a meeting about 5 years ago at a CPTM meeting in Malaysia, and at the opening of that meeting, the Prime Minister who addressed us, Prime Minister of Malaysia, said, "Ladies and gentlemen, in Malaysia, we have been using science and technology in our development, and I tell you, our country has now over 30 million people, and because of our science and technology success and so forth, we have zero unemployment in Malaysia." So I and a number of heads of state were there at that meeting, and people took that message home very, very, very much challenged.
Yeah.
I just wanted to remind us about the importance of data.
Yeah. That's quite right. It was quite a number of years ago. So here we are today, still kind of absorbing the relevance of that thing. You had a point, Robert.
Can I make 2 points?
And your background is
to switch this on.
Physics. Yes.
My background, I suppose, is physics, and more recently, regulation of radioactive waste disposal. How about that? On this business of networks coming together, a well-known physical process suddenly came to mind, and that is if you imagine you link paper clips together, and then you try picking them up. To begin with, you'll only pick up individual paper clips or small groups of paper clips. But there comes a point, which is a phase change, where you make another link, and you find you pick up practically every paper link, and that is how I suspect networks can link together. You get a phase change. So networks can have small beginnings, and they can all be a lot of separate networks, but there will come a point where they all come together. So that was one thing I wanted to say. While I've got the mic, I think I might like to say something else from earlier on. Oh, I can say it very quickly. It's a point that Luke made, and Boniface echoed that point, which is just the phrase absorptive capacity. And if you want governments to listen to science advice, you need to have embedded in government sufficient absorptive capacity. And of course, it is scientific topic specific, in that somebody who's good in one scientific area who is embedded in government might be completely deaf in another scientific area.
Yeah, okay.
That was within my minute, wasn't it?
That was, and I didn't use a drum yet.
You tie the drum to yourself.
No, that's it. Okay. We are almost probably about 3 minutes to go around to see if Alun has any immediate comment.
Well, there's so many different things to pick up on. That.
Just pick one
I'm
more.
just going to choose one thing which is I just think is important, and it's picking up on Heneri's point that he made about linking science and technology to planning, and it's just about on the data side. I would really pick up on structured data and structuring as well, and there is the need to shape things. There's a need to there's a kind of mood at the moment where the data kind of tells you everything, and you just sit back and you just wait and see where it points. And I think that's so desperately wrong now, and probably will be maybe forever, but certainly for a long time. There are big decisions that need to be taken, and once you can take these decisions about what you want, then you can decide how data can help you to do that. And just the example around use of data in the kind of settings you're talking about in governments and between governments, rather than focusing completely on the analytics and sort of taking stuff out of data, you have to kind of create a framework where the data can then move around and do useful things for you. But that framework needs to be created. It's not going to evolve magically. So that's the most important thing.
And how do we create it? That's maybe at 1:30.
Yeah, great. Let's create it at 1:30. Yeah.
We have another science advisor, the chief scientist from Government Accountability Office, coming online. And okay, any other quick Boniface? No, let me. Otherwise, I know I have a Cameroonian spirit, despite our ongoing discussions. But no, but I'm trying to see, and then you'll have the last before the 3 minutes. Phil, yes.
Two things. Following up from Alun and referring back to what Mihaela said about the data scientists. Big data tends to lead to the ability to make predictions rather than the ability to understand what is happening. So you can make good predictions off it for some time till that relationship breaks. You might not understand the causality. In terms of something that Omar said about how do we persuade Donald Trump, what facts will persuade Donald Trump, there was a fascinating article in the New Scientist last week which said that if data or fact challenges my sense of identity, I will tend to ignore it. If it gives me something local to do, like build a wall around my golf course in Ireland, I'm much more likely to be able to do it. So again, we've got this juxtaposition of data as to who is it being aimed at and how are they receiving it.
Thank you. And then Zungu. No, Zungu and then finally Boniface. Sorry, Omar. Zungu.
Thank you, Mihaela. My comment was on the different types of networks. I was just looking at the basketball just in front of you. You do realize that you have quite a number of networks, but they are all centered around the basketball. That is the essence of having the networks. They all making one structure, which is the basketball.
These composites materials, and they have some particular qualities, which reason why people are interested, and somebody got a Nobel Prize for it. And I'm saying that were we to kind of, as a metaphor, think in terms of those particular, because it's very difficult to visualize this data that makes a difference in small networks interacting with other networks.
Come up to make one.
To make one, yeah. Is the question is the oneness.
Yes.
Yeah, oneness at any point of time. Okay, Boniface.
Yeah, thank you, Mihaela. I just wanted to come back to a question, very interesting question, an important question you asked. You try to answer, but you never stop. But which is a summary of what we are doing here. The topic where it says emerging patterns of science and technology advice. Which means that we are saying that things are changing, the patterns are changing. It's a continuous process. But how far are they going to reach? This is the question we ask. Because the overall objective for us is not to say this is how the pattern is evolving. That is a static point of view. We need to look at it from a dynamic point of view. Okay, this is how things are moving. We all accept that. So what next do we do? How do we prepare ourselves to cope up with changing realities? So the first question is, you ask the question, where are we? So the answer is difficult and easy. It is easy in the sense that I would say technology is evolving at such an exponential rate
that is difficult to foresee the future. Nobody can tell. That is the difficult part of it. But the process is there. We have the consciousness that the process has started. We don't know where it's going to end. That is the difficult part of it. But the easy part of it is that for the moment, we know that this is how things are moving. And so so we have to prepare ourselves to adapt ourselves to the changing realities. I think this is the take-home conclusion from what we have been saying. So thank you very much.
Actually, in addition to buckyball, if you see this thing, which again looks pretty, and do you know when we had the dialogue in Lesotho, Maseru dialogue, all the networks that we have, the links, they made this kind of things and instead of a pin. And what that tells you is how these networks go together and change without even necessarily anybody intervening. So but it's just a question of, there are many other things in it. But
the take home I was going to say that we should not adopt some sort of passive attitude, but a proactive attitude. If we know that the future is going to be continuous change, we therefore have to be more proactive. Being reactive, if we are reactive, we simply say, okay, things are changing. It ends there. Everybody packs God. We went to CPTM session 2016. They say the change is parting. The person is changing. So we stop there. That's a reactive aspect of it. But if we are proactive, we know that things are going to change, and we have to be anticipative and try to see what the difficulties may be, and then we look for easier solutions, and we anticipate solutions for that.
With the CPTM about vision, eventually you just took it back home. And with this, Boniface and Chris and Heneri and Ashok and anybody else who is on the digital space, I have a drum which is not virtual. I don't know what is the equivalent of the virtual drum in virtual drum yet, but probably will have to be the same for the time being. There is a lot of data within the sound and the drumming process. Okay, so hopefully you can join us, Heneri and Chris and Ashok, in about 1 hour or so. It will be easier for you to join us than we to get back together here, the few of us who are here. But we have the chief scientist, Tim Pearson, who from Washington, who is going to tell us a little bit more about issues where data or data analytics, without going into detail, could be handy. And you might also refer to this new creature, the data science advisor, that they had an experience with in the president's office, Obama's current office. And there is no prediction about will that function exist or not exist later. Maybe there will be even more than now. And also we will have again a kind of finale about the data and statistics. So we'll have a very experienced government statistician from Canada online, which has very provocative views about what a big problem they have in Canada in the statistics department because of the data. And also we have from the British UK National Statistics, the chief economist of National Statistics, of chief economist, Andy, or what is his function? Because you don't know anyway. That is very difficult, but he's the chief statistician of the ONS, who is preoccupied with data and statistics, and he will tell you also what big problems we have. So all that will be rounded up into a kind of data end, or the value of data end, and we'll have kind of a roundup, and by hopefully 2:30, 5 minutes a bit after only, we'll move straight away into the annual general meeting of the CPTM, which is not, unfortunately, CPTM Limited has an AGM, is quite outdated not CPTM Limited, but the company type of structure for any networks of the kind that we have. So it's time that we move on to something quite different. Otherwise, we lose we stretch ourselves, our imagination, in trying to follow rules and structures which are totally unfit. And they're unfit right from 95. But that's a separate issue we'll discuss during the AG.